activity results. Sometimes we don't ask for productivity right away. All we ask for first is activity. Now, it's pretty easy to check activity. If you joined a sales organization and you're supposed to make 10 calls first week, it's pretty simple on Friday, right? Pretty simple on Friday. Say, John, how many calls did you make? John says, well, you say, John, well won't fit in my little box here. And John starts on a story. And you say, John, the reason I made this box so small is so a story won't fit. I just need an activity number from 1 to 10. Now, if the results on activity first week are not good, those have got to be signals, clues. Now, you might try another week, and you got to be the judge, right? How far you go in putting a team together with somebody's lack of precise activity. Now, finally, here's the last part, productivity. Finally, the tree must have figs. Finally, the ultimate test of a quality team is productivity. Fruit of measurable progress in reasonable. Now, as a leader, you've got to learn to measure results and productivity and activity. And here's part of the skill of leadership. Be up front in team building with what you expect. Don't let the surprises come later. Put it up front. God was very up front, Old Testament. God says, if you move toward me, I move towards you. See, that's very upfront. That's called making it fairly clear. You take a step, I step. Now, I only ask you to take human steps. I take God steps, you take human steps. But you got to take a step. Because here's how else it reads. You don't move, I don't move. You say, well, that's arbitrary. Well, when you're God, you can set it up that way. When you get your planet, you can set it up however you want to. This one is set up. I got a good philosophical statement for you. Life was designed to respond, to deserve, not to need. On this planet, it doesn't read, if you need, you will reap. No, it reads, if you plan, you will reap. You say, well, I really need to reap. Then you really need to plan. Life wasn't designed for the needers. Life was designed for the planters. Life doesn't respond to what we need. Life responds to what we deserve by activity, belief, faith, action, movement. You gotta take a step. So one of the things to make clear when you're bringing somebody on board, say, Mary, if you step, we do these things. If you take 3 steps, we go this, this, and this, and this. If you do this, we do all of this. But if you don't move, we don't move. It's very important to make it clear. Why? Because everybody needs to pay. Everybody needs to pay. Even if the payment is only token, it has to be paid. Because life responds to deserve, not need. Fascinating study. Here's one of the clues to leadership. Learn to work with the people who deserve it, not the people who need it. Now, we're talking team building now. We're talking winning a championship. We're talking putting together an enterprise. And the key to leadership is teach people how to deserve it. Teach them how to take the steps. Teach them how to make the moves. And we only ask for token moves. We only ask for limited activity. We only ask for steps in the right direction. But without the steps, we have no promise. So this is one of the most important things you can do for children, is to teach them how to deserve good things, how to deserve the favors. You got to pay the price. Price is how you deserve it. Here's the next key. In building a successful team, you must learn when you've got too many. It's a simple story. It comes from the Bible. Now, being an amateur, you sort of have to take my way of putting it. Good Lord said, just take my word for it. You got too many. And Gideon said, well, what should I do? And the good Lord said, try it. Get the 32,000 troops together and give them your last final ringing speech. We're off to fight the Midianites. And he said, when you finish the speech, finish it like this. Now then, that we're off to fight, if there's anybody here that's afraid and you think we're about to lose this battle upcoming with the Midianites, you can be excused this time, go home, can't use you this time. Gideon said, clever, should have thought of that myself. Gets the 32,000 troops together, gets up, gives his last ringing speech and says, we're off to fight, but if there's anybody here who thinks we're going to lose, you can be excused this time. You can just go home. We're just going to take what's left. And Gideon went. And sure enough, some went home. And the number was 22,000. Gideon says, wow. Hey, if you've got 32,000 and 22,000 think you're going to lose, guess what? You're going to lose. You got too many. Here's the key to leadership. In Heist, it's possible to recruit losers. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's possible. You say, well, why is that? This is called one of those things. When you're moving, no telling who you collect, right? So here's part of the test, you know. Who thinks we're going to lose? You can be excused this time. So Gideon's got 10,000 left. He says, no problem, we'll do it with 10,000. Good Lord says, well, you still got too many. Gideon says, well, what now? And the good Lord says, try this. March the 10,000 till they're hot and thirsty down by the river. And those that are careless just drop their shield and spear and dive in the water and start drinking. You can't use them. They're too careless. The ones that keep the spear and the shield and lap the water like a dog, keep looking and alert, those are the ones because they're trained and ready to go. Gideon said, clever. And he marches the 10,000 till they're hot and thirsty down by the river. Sure enough, when he gets to the river, some are hot and careless, and they just throw down their spear and shield and jump in the water. And the number was 9,700. Key to leadership. In Heist, it's possible to recruit the careless. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's inevitable. This is called one of those things. Now, if you've got an important battle, you got to know who's careless. And this was part of the test. So Gideon says, you 9,700, home. And he sent them home, dripping home. Now he's got 300 left. Gideon said, no problem. From 32,000 to 300. Gideon is still willing to try it. We call that courageous leadership. You've got to read the story. Don't have time to give you the whole scenario, but it was a fascinating story. With 300, the battle plan was the most strange, unusual battle plan ever designed. But he won the day, chased off the Midianites. Gideon becomes the military Jewish hero of the day. His story provided for us to read one more time, which says, as a leader, remember, there are times when you may have too many. This is called inevitable. Next, don't linger too long. If you've got a job to do, sometimes you have to be fairly swift in your analysis of who will and who won't and who can and who can't. Jesus said, in putting the Christian philosophy to work, two of you take a city and you two take a city and you two take a city and walk into the city and tell the story. And if they respond fairly soon, stay. And if they don't respond fairly soon, don't stay. He advised them to leave the city that didn't respond fairly soon. So you got to put some time. Now, you got to be a judge of how much time you give someone to respond or something to respond. This is part of the unusual skill of leadership, learning time dimensions, how much time to give. Jesus was fairly clear, said, don't stay too long. If the city doesn't buy the story, he said, leave. And I think the reason was fairly clear. There are too many cities that will to linger with those who, well, it's called the law of averages. Play the law of averages. Don't stay too long. Now, he gave them some other fascinating instructions. Who knows what it all meant? He said, when you walk out of one of these cities that doesn't buy the story, wipe off your shoes. Whatever that meant in those days, no telling what that meant. If you walked out of somebody's house and wiped off your shoes, I mean, no telling what that meant. There's probably some modern gestures that are just as good, but, you know, who knows? I don't know. I'm an amateur on this stuff. So. But what it does mean, leaders must have a sense of timing. We call it measurable progress. You've got to be smart enough to measure progress, and you've got to also be smart enough to understand reasonable time. We can't be unreasonable with time. And however you wish to describe good and however you wish to frame your ideology of evil, there are a lot of ways to put it. For some people, evil is too strong a word. I don't know. This is part of your own philosophical conclusions that you have to come to in trying to evaluate this earthly struggle. Evil, good, tyranny, liberty, sickness, health, winning, losing, life, death, opportunity, tragedy. It's part of the life scenario. And part of it is described in rather philosophical terms on a fairly higher plane called the Great War between good and evil. Now, here's part of the scenario. When the founding fathers put this country together, they said, we want maximum liberty and minimum law, but we do have to have minimum law to restrain that mysterious dark side of our nature. Because sure enough, even though we've got a good thing going called America, there are probably some people who are not going to run by the rules. So not only will we build some cities, we probably better build some jail. Why? Just to be bright enough to understand this clash, this scenario of good and evil. And all good leaders must understand this clash, this scenario, however you wish to describe it, whatever terms you wish to call it. We must understand it. Now, here's part of the understanding. Some people have sold out to the evil side for whatever reason. You don't have to spend much time with why. All you have to do is spend time with who? I went to my 30th year class reunion a few years ago. A little small village, right, I grew up in. There was only about 150 in the graduating class. And after 30 years, almost half of the graduating class was at the reunion, which was pretty good. We had a 2-day celebration. I'm master of ceremony. On the second day, we had a little moment to remember those who had deceased. I think there were 8. And I knew them all, so I gave a little scenario, a little story about each one. And then we took time, just a little moment of silence to remember, because some of them were very, very unique human beings. But they were gone. I thought later, 8 out of 150 after 30 years. Is that about average? Guess what I discovered? It's about average. So after 30 years out of 150, it's not will 8 be missing, it is only who will be missing. So in part of the scenario of understanding leadership, the key is to not be surprised when the inevitable occurs. Because if you become too surprised, we will call you naive. If the sun goes down, the guy says, what's happened, what's happened? It means he hasn't been here long, I guess, right? Or the guy is naive. Come on, come on. There are some things you don't want to look surprised, especially in public.